When winter settles over a town, it brings with it a certain stillness, a hush that seems to hold its breath. And in that quiet, tucked behind frosted windows and Christmas lights, there are stories that unfold far from the bustle of holiday cheer. This is one of those stories. A tale about a father who would move heaven and earth to keep a small flame of wonder alive for the daughter he adores. And a Christmas wish so simple, so fragile, it bends the heart to hear it spoken. Tonight, we step into their world for a little while, into the softness of hope, the weight of love, and the quiet spaces where miracles sometimes choose to land. Settle in, take a breath, and let the story begin. The Kringle Catch, written by Beryl Coops. Chapter 1. The Only Thing She Wanted. The steady beeping of the IV pump had become the background music of David's world. A thin, fragile metronome that measured not time, but loss. Each soft chirp seemed to pluck another thread from the life he had once known, leaving the living room now a makeshift hospice suite caught between what it had been and what it had become. In the center of it all, arranged carefully in a nest of pillows on the couch, lay his daughter, Vivian, 7 years old. Too young to understand everything happening in her body, yet old enough to sense the weight that hung over the house like an unmoving cloud. Her face had grown delicate and fine, almost translucent in the gentle winter light, but her eyes, those enormous, trusting eyes, still held a brightness that defied everything working to dim it. And her smile, somehow impossibly, she kept offering him that small, determined curve of joy, as if she were trying to lift him up when her own strength was slipping. Outside, the world busied itself with Christmas. Neighbors' fairy lights blinked cheerfully. The distant hum of carols drifted across driveways, and frost traced lacework patterns across windows. But inside this house, the season felt muted, subdued, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. The only nod to the festivities was a tiny artificial tree perched on the coffee table, its thin, multicolored lights glinting off vials of medication and sterile syringes. The contrast made David ache. "Daddy," Vivian whispered, her voice soft as tissue paper. "I finished my letter." She extended a folded piece of paper with fingers that trembled slightly. Her handwriting, uneven and wobbly in crayon, sprawled across the page like it was trying to be brave for her. David took it gently, careful not to crumple the edges. He read, "Dear Santa, all I want for Christmas is a letter from you. A real one, just for me. I have been good. I try real hard when it hurts. Love, Vivian." His chest tightened. He had been prepared for the impossible, a trip somewhere magical, something extravagant, something unattainable. But this small, heartbreakingly simple wish was somehow more impossible than all the others. A request not for adventure or toys, but for a connection, for proof that the universe saw her, that she mattered. "He'll write back, won't he, Daddy?" she asked, her eyes searching his face with perfect, painful trust. He swallowed. "Of course he will, sweet pea," he said, his voice steady only because he forced it to be. But inside, it burned. He was lying to her. He could feel it coating his tongue, bitter and heavy. David was a man who solved things. Structural engineer, builder of bridges, the sort of man who could look at a problem and know the angles, the weight, the load-bearing points. But this wish from his daughter was made of something intangible, delicate. There was no blueprint for wonder, no manual for magic. Later, when Vivian finally drifted into a fragile, restless sleep, he retreated to the kitchen table with a piece of cheap red craft paper and a pen he could barely keep steady. The house felt colder than it had earlier, as if his lie had let in a draft. He wrote, "Dear Vivian," then stared at the words for a long moment. It looked wrong. His handwriting was recognizable, no child would mistake it. He crumpled the paper. He tried again. printing block letters, awkward, clunky things that didn't feel like Santa so much as a man trying too hard. "The North Pole is very snowy," he wrote, then winced. Hollow, forced, dead on the page. He crushed that one too. The pen rolled from his fingers, clattering against the table. He scrubbed both hands over his face, feeling the bristle of unshaven stubble, each rough scrape a reminder he hadn't slept properly in weeks. He could forge a letter. He could mimic the shape of magic, but he couldn't replicate the spirit of it. Not the kind she still believed in, with the purity only children and the dying possess. His gaze drifted toward the living room doorway. Vivian slept curled around the stuffed reindeer he'd bought at a gas station on the drive home from the hospital. A cheap, lopsided thing with matted fur, but she held it like it was precious. A weight, thick and suffocating, pressed down on him. He would try, God. He would try, but for the first time since her diagnosis, the crushing certainty of failure settled into him like cold iron. He had always been able to fix things, patch them, reinforce them, but this was beyond him. Staring at the blank red paper, David felt something inside him quietly break. He was going to fail her. Chapter 2. The Soot and the Sawdust. By morning, David's desperation had calcified into something sharp and focused. His engineer's mind, usually methodical, measured, capable of seeing a problem from every angle, shifted into a different gear. Not the calm, analytical one of his work life, but a frantic, makeshift version of it. A survival mode built from love and fear, where every decision felt like a last attempt to stop the tide from washing away everything he loved. He couldn't give Vivian real magic, but he could fake it, recreate it, assemble it like a construction project, piece by fragile piece, praying she wouldn't look too closely at the seams. The first piece of the illusion was the letter. He spent hours hunched over his laptop, the glow of the screen turning his tired face a sickly blue, fonts blurred together until his eyes burned. Finally, he found one called Jolly Elf, a whimsical, slightly awkward script that didn't look too polished. It might pass as Santa trying his best with cold fingers, he told himself. He typed slowly, agonizing over every word. "Dear Vivian, I have heard you are being very brave. The elves and I are very proud of you. Keep believing. Love, Santa." When he printed it, the letters came out too neat, too clean, too human. He tried to disguise that crumpling the paper, smoothing it out, staining the corner with a tea bag for age. But the illusion didn't transform. It only looked like a poor imitation of something magical. He stared at the paper, feeling it mock him silently. The second piece was the evidence. While Vivian napped, her breaths shallow but steady, he slipped out into the backyard. The winter air bit at his cheeks, raw and unforgiving. He stood among the bare branches and frost-hardened grass, holding a handsaw that suddenly felt ridiculous in his grip. He cut small slivers from a branch, two uneven chunks he hoped might mimic reindeer hooves if you didn't look too closely. He strapped them to the soles of his work boots with duct tape, grimacing as he lifted each foot experimentally. He felt like a fool. Still, he trudged through the yard, pressing the makeshift hoofprints into the frosty ground. Each step was a careful, exaggerated press. He squatted once, adjusting the angle to look more natural. He dusted off a bit of bark. He sprinkled handfuls of glitter, shimmery, pink-tinted stuff the craft store had optimistically labeled fairy dust around the prints. In the weak winter daylight, it didn't look magical. It looked garish, like someone had dropped a party decoration in the snow. His shoulders sagged, but he kept going, because what else was there? This wasn't about perfection anymore. It was about hope, hers, and his. Then came his masterstroke, the part he prayed would tie the illusion together. Santa himself. He'd found a man online, Jerry. Profile picture blurry. Reviews mixed. $100 for a quick appearance. A bargain for one moment of belief. At 7 on the dot, the doorbell rang. David's stomach twisted as he opened the door and saw the man he had hired. The Santa costume was worse than the photo. A thin red suit with creases like it had been stuffed in a bag. A beard that was obviously a piece of shiny fringe attached to the hat with clear elastic. And a belly made from a lumpy pillow that refused to sit centered. The smell hit next cigarette smoke clinging to the polyester fabric like a second scent. "Ho, ho, ho," Jerry said, not even trying to make it sound festive. More like he was reading it off a cue card and regretting his life choices. Vivian, waiting with her blanket pulled up to her chest, looked up at him with hopeful awe. And then, slowly, her expression shifted. Confusion flickered. Then understanding. Then something worse, something like disappointment folding inward, as though she wanted to pretend for his sake but couldn't quite manage it. "Are you one of Santa's helpers?" she asked, her small voice quivering around the edges. Jerry shrugged. "Yeah, sure, kid. Merry Christmas." He shoved the present, a generic, obviously rewrapped teddy bear, into her lap and turned back toward the door. His car engine sputtered to life barely seconds after the door closed behind him. A hush fell over the living room, thick, heavy, painful. David stood frozen in the doorway, watching the ruins of his carefully constructed plans scatter around him. The hoofprints outside were already melting. The glitter looked like trash. The letter he'd forged sat crumpled in his pocket like a confession. Vivian didn't cry. She held the teddy bear quietly, studying the misaligned eyes and the off-center bow. Then she glanced at the window, at the uneven reindeer tracks, and finally at her father's boots, still dusted with tiny flecks of soot from his workshop, still shedding sawdust that had clung to the duct tape. She saw everything, and she said nothing. Her lower lip trembled, but she pressed it in with the bravery of someone far too young to bear that kind of hurt. She looked down at the bear again and simply breathed, shallow and quiet. David's heart cracked open. He had tried to build a castle of wonder for her, brick by shaky brick, and all he'd managed was a flimsy house of cards. One gust, one look had toppled it, and with it, the last small spark of her Christmas hope. Chapter 3. The Longest Night. The silence that swallowed the house after Jerry's car sputtered away was unlike anything David had heard before. It wasn't just quiet, it was hollow. A silence with shape and weight, settling over the living room like a curtain pulled across the world. Even the IV pump seemed to mute itself, its steady beeping now a far-off echo instead of the sharp metronome it had been all day. Vivian didn't say a word. She didn't complain, didn't scold the bad Santa, didn't even unwrap the present. She simply lowered herself back against her pillows with slow, careful movements, as though any sudden shift might shatter something inside her. The teddy bear Jerry had thrust at her lay untouched beside her hip, wrapped in its shiny, cheap paper like a reminder of everything that had gone wrong. Her eyes closed, not in sleep, not in peace, but in a small, exhausted surrender. And that broke him in a way her illness never had. "Vivian? Sweetheart," David managed, sinking to his knees beside the couch. His voice came out thin, cracking at the edges. "Sometimes Santa is so busy he has to send—" "It's okay, Daddy," she whispered, barely above breath. She didn't open her eyes, didn't look at him. It was a silly wish, a tiny sentence, softly spoken, but it hit him like a blow. He would have preferred anger, tears, a stubborn insistence that Santa was real. Anything other than this quiet acceptance that the world was smaller and duller than she'd hoped. That magic wasn't coming. David's throat burned with words he couldn't say, apologies he couldn't form. What could he tell her? That he had tried? That he had failed? That he had spent days building illusions, only to watch them crumble like wet tissue? Instead, he sat with her, the minutes stretching into hours that felt suspended, as though time had paused just long enough to let grief seep into every corner of the room. He attempted the letter again. His hands shook so badly he could hardly hold the pen. Every draft looked wrong, too neat, too forced, too obviously him. He imagined giving it to her and seeing that same hurt flicker in her eyes. He couldn't bear it. He briefly considered driving to the all-night mall to find a proper Santa, one who might come with a real beard and a kinder heart. But Vivian was weak. Crowds were dangerous. And deep down he knew it wouldn't matter. The moment had passed. Her belief was slipping through his fingers like snowmelt. By midnight, he was sitting on the floor beside her couch, leaning against it as though it might anchor him. Vivian slept in irregular patterns, short bursts of rest punctuated by tiny sighs or the faint flutter of her eyelids. He watched each rise and fall of her chest too closely, counting breaths like a man monitoring the last embers of a fire. The IV pump chimed quietly, a steady, patient reminder of the fragile thread that kept her tethered here. This was the night he'd feared more than anything, not because it was Christmas Eve, but because it felt like the end of something he couldn't name, as if the shadows in the corners of the room were gathering, drawing in, preparing to claim everything he wasn't ready to lose. He felt himself sliding toward a place he'd spent months avoiding, a place where logic, science, and reason couldn't help him. A place where numbers meant nothing against what he wanted most. Without thinking, he bowed his head. He wasn't a praying man. He didn't know the right words or the right posture. His hands didn't fold neatly. His thoughts didn't line up like equations. But something broke free inside him, raw, aching, unfiltered, and he let it pour out, silent and desperate. Please, not for me, for her. One letter, one sign, one moment where the world feels kind. Let her believe. Let her go knowing there's beauty left. He didn't aim the plea anywhere specific. Not to God, not to Santa, not even to fate. Just out into the cold, indifferent universe, hoping that somewhere, somehow, something would hear the aching love behind it. But nothing answered. The room stayed still. The shadows didn't shift. The only movement was the snow outside, drifting in slow spirals past the window, quiet, indifferent, unbothered by a father's breaking heart. Exhaustion finally pulled at him, heavy and merciless. His head slumped sideways, resting near Vivian's foot beneath the blankets. He left his hand there, just brushing the fabric, as though that touch might keep her anchored to him a little longer. His breathing evened out in a shallow, restless doze. His dreams were jagged things, half-formed images of her laughter fading down hallways he couldn't follow, of Santa suits falling apart in his hands, of letters dissolving into blank red paper before he could read them. He had fought with every practical tool he had, every trick, every ounce of reason, and in the final hour before dawn, he knew, with a painful, quiet clarity, that he had nothing left. All he could do now was wait, for morning, for whatever heartbreak it would bring. Chapter 4. The Letter and the Bell. David woke slowly, pulled from a shallow, aching sleep by the softest touch, a small, cool hand resting gently on his cheek. For a moment he didn't move. Part of him feared that opening his eyes would reveal something terrible, that the world had shifted in the night, in the way he had been dreading for months. But then he heard her voice. "Daddy!" A breath. A miracle of sound. He came. He really came. He opened his eyes. Vivian was sitting upright, propped carefully by her pillows. Her skin was still pale, her frailty still heartbreakingly obvious, but she was glowing. Truly glowing, as though a light had been switched on inside her. A light he hadn't seen in so long he almost didn't recognize it. Joy. Real, radiant joy. Her smile stretched wide, her eyes alive with wonder so pure it made his chest tighten painfully. There, resting in her lap, was a piece of paper. Not the cheap red craft paper he had fumbled with the night before. This was something wholly different. Thick, creamy parchment, soft, deckled edges catching the early light like feathers. Its color was the warm shade of old vanilla, and as David leaned closer, a faint scent drifted up from it, Pine needles, cold winter air, and something finer, something crisp and bright, like starlight. "Look," she whispered, touching the elegant script with a trembling finger. The ink shimmered faintly, an iridescent black that changed hue when it caught the light. David bent closer to read. "My dearest Vivian, I am writing to you from the sleigh. High above the clouds. Rudolph is keeping us steady. I saw you sleeping, and I must say, your bravery is the shiniest thing I've seen all night, brighter than any star. I especially loved the picture you drew of the 3 reindeer. The one with the lopsided antler made me laugh. Don't ever stop drawing. You asked for a letter, and so you shall have one. But I want you to have this too. It is a special bell from my sleigh. It only rings for those who truly believe. Keep it close, and you will always hear the magic. Remember, my dear child, the love you have in your heart is the greatest magic of all. It is a light that never, ever goes out. With all my love, Santa Claus." David's breath faltered. The lopsided antler. That ridiculous drawing she'd made weeks ago in the hospital, which he'd tucked into a folder and never shown anyone. He hadn't spoken of it, hadn't pulled it out, hadn't even mentioned the detail aloud. For a moment, the world seemed to tilt. His mind scrambled for explanations, reaching for logic, grasping at it like a man trying to catch smoke. "Daddy," Vivian whispered again, her smile unfaltering. "Listen." She held up a small silver bell. It was tarnished, old in the way precious heirlooms are old, tied with a simple red ribbon. She gave it a gentle shake. The sound it produced was not sound, not exactly. It was clearer, purer, more delicate than any chime he'd ever heard. Not just audible, felt. The tone vibrated in his chest, in the hollow places behind his ribs. It echoed through him with a cleansing clarity, as though it were reaching into the cracks inside him and softening them, loosening something tightly coiled. For months he'd carried the crushing weight of helplessness, dense, immovable. But now, as that bell chimed, the weight shifted, lightened, just enough for him to breathe a little deeper. Vivian sighed with perfect contentment, reclining into her pillows, the parchment letter pressed gently to her chest. She closed her eyes, serene, peaceful. The faintest smile lingered on her lips. The room felt warmer, quieter, almost sacred. Unable to sit still, David rose shakily and crossed to the window. The snow outside was untouched, blank and soft. But something tugged at him, a strange instinct guiding his gaze to the sill. The glitter he had scattered the day before was gone completely. Not a speck remained. But in its place, perfectly centered on the weathered wood, lay a single frost-covered pine needle. He reached out, brushing it with trembling fingers. It was icy, delicate, real. Behind him, the bell rested in his palm, solid, cold, undeniably present. He turned it over and over, the metal catching the new sunlight like it was holding its own private shimmer. His rational mind, the engineer in him, fought for ground searching, for explanations, for threads to pull, for any plausible way this could have happened. But the echo of the bell still hummed in the quiet air, vibrating faintly through him. And that fissure in his soul, the fracture that had only widened with every failed attempt to create magic for his daughter, felt healed. Not wholly, but mended at the edges. He looked back at Vivian, her breathing gentle and even, her expression one of perfect, luminous peace. Something had happened, something impossible, and for the first time in months, David allowed himself to believe not in logic, not in reason, but in the fragile, precious possibility that miracles sometimes slip quietly into the cracks of a breaking heart. Chapter 5. The Mended Crack. Christmas morning arrived on a hush, a soft, pale gold light slipping through the window and settling across the room like a blessing. Snow muffled the world outside. Even the distant hum of cars felt subdued, softened under winter's careful hand. But inside the house, the silence was different now. Not the heavy, suffocating stillness of dread, but a quieter, reverent kind. A silence that held its breath gently, as if not to disturb something sacred. Vivian did not wake again. She passed a few hours after dawn, her small hands still curled around the creamy parchment letter and the tarnished silver bell. She left the world with a faint smile resting on her lips, the same serene expression she'd worn when she'd whispered, "He came." There was no fear in her face, no struggle. Her passing was so peaceful, so impossibly gentle. It felt less like a life ending and more like a child slipping into a deeper dream. David sat beside her, holding her hand long after her fingers had gone still. There were no words in him, not then, not for a long while. Just an ache so vast he could hardly find himself inside it. The days that followed blurred into one another, not in chaos, but in muted, necessary motion. Phone calls, arrangements, paperwork. The sort of tasks that demanded a functioning body but spared no thought for the heart inside it. David moved through them, as if walking under water, slow, numb, weighted by love and absence. He buried his daughter wrapped in her favorite blanket, with the letter and the bell gently placed in her hands. The idea of separating her from them was unthinkable. They weren't objects now. They were part of her final story, part of the glow that had filled her last morning. They belonged with her. Weeks passed, then a month. The grief inside him did not leave. It never would, but it changed shape. The sharp, tearing pain softened, stretching into an emptier, more bearable ache. A space that hurt, yes, but did not destroy. He could breathe in it. He could sit with it. Some days he could even walk around it without falling through. He found himself looking at her drawings without collapsing. He found he could tidy her things without feeling as though he were erasing her. The guilt that had once gnawed at him, the guilt of not being enough, not doing enough, began to ebb. Not gone, but gentler. One evening, while sorting through a drawer of her clothes, he found a small, forgotten box of her art supplies. Inside lay the drawing she had made in the hospital, the one with the 3 reindeer, one antler charmingly crooked, the whole thing lopsided but bursting with the enthusiasm only children have when they draw for someone they love. He held it delicately, as though the crayon lines might smudge if he breathed too hard. He had never shown this picture to anyone, not to a nurse, not to a friend, not even to her. He had tucked it away the moment she handed it to him, promising to keep it safe. And then the question came, the one he had been locking behind a barricade of rationality. How? His mind, disciplined, structured, logical, offered what reason could. Perhaps he had created it in a moment of confused grief. Perhaps he had written the letter in some dissociative haze. Perhaps his mind had crafted a perfectly vivid dream that felt real because he needed it to. It was the only explanation that made sense, the only one that fit the world he had always believed in. But then he would remember the cool scent of pine and starlight that had clung to the parchment, the impossibly clean windowsill, stripped of glitter but holding a single frost-kissed pine needle. The bell's tone so clear, so pure. It seemed to vibrate inside him, and the way something in his chest had healed when it rang. He stood by her bedroom window one night, watching snow drift down through the lamplight, each flake turning in slow spirals. He felt the ache inside him widen and soften, like a long-held breath finally exhaled. He realized that the miracle, whatever it had been, was not meant to be solved. It wasn't a puzzle. It wasn't a test. It wasn't a trick. It was a gift. One final kindness for a girl who deserved it, and one quiet healing for a father who desperately needed it. The Kringle Catch, he understood now, hadn't been about proving anything. It hadn't been about catching Santa in the act or creating evidence of magic. It was about catching hold of something fleeting and luminous, a moment of wonder that arrived when the world felt its darkest. Whether it came from a father's deepest love or from something stranger and softer that slipped into their home that night, didn't matter. What mattered was the look on Vivian's face when she held the letter, how her smile lit the room, how the bell had chimed in his chest and stitched together a crack he had thought beyond repair. His daughter had left the world believing it was beautiful, and he had been given just enough light to keep going. He didn't need to know where the miracle came from. He simply needed to carry it. For her, always. Thank you for spending this time with this humble story. The Kringle Catch, written by Barrel Coops. Some stories leave a soft echo behind them, a reminder of the people we love, the moments we hold on to, and the small miracles that carry us through the hardest days. I hope this one stays with you, even after the last word fades. If the story touched your heart, please tap the like button, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps these stories find the listeners who need them most. And if you'd like to hear more mysteries, more quiet moments, more tales filled with wonder, you're always welcome here. Thank you for listening. And until next time, take care and keep a little magic with you.